Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Expert. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of the Library of NIH Grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years, actually closer to 40 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant writing mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. If you're attending live, this is a reminder that you are in listen-only mode. You can, if you look on your toolbar, there's a Q&A box, so you can type your questions into the Q&A box. You can go ahead and start doing that now. There's also a chat box, so if you have something you'd like to add to the conversation that we're having, some observation or your own experience or a link that might clarify some information, feel free to do so there. And if you are watching this as a recording, and more of our viewers are watching this as a recording, both on our YouTube channel and in our course library, just a reminder that today is December 11th, 2024, and everything we say today is true to the best of our knowledge, but always double check the NIH website and always check with your program officer. This is not meant to take the place of advising from an NIH expert. So what you should be viewing in the library now, well, it's December 11th, so if you are submitting for a February deadline, hopefully you have done a lot of your prep steps, because you're going to have a hell of a time getting anybody on the phone during the holidays. That would include mentors or program officers. And so hopefully you've done a lot of those prep steps. You have picked your mechanism, and you've watched Master the R series or Master the K series, chapter 1 preparation, and you've nailed down your deadline, your study section, your mechanism, your NOFO, etc., institute, all of that. And you're into the writing. Hopefully you've drafted your aims page and you're starting on your significance and innovation. In my ideal world, that's where you would be if you were targeting a February deadline. But fear not, that may be aspirational for some of you, and lots of successful applicants write on a much shorter timeline than that, which is not ideal, but it's the reality of many people's lives. NIH updates, of course, there's lots of news coming out of NIH at the moment. There is a new director. I am going to refrain from commenting on that for the time being. There may be a new head of Health and Human Services, although dozens upon dozens of Nobel laureates are writing an open letter to protest it, so we'll see what happens with that. I'm not going to comment on that until we have more information, but suffice it to say that I'm concerned, and I'm sure you are too. So we'll watch and wait and hope for the best. In terms of more imminent information about NIH, of course, they're launching Forms I for deadlines on or after January 25th, 2025. So for those of you who are writing to those February deadlines, make sure you're using the correct form set, and make sure you are aware of the fact that there are changes to scoring criteria in the R series. If you're writing a institutional training grant like a T32, there are changes to some of the tables. The way that the candidate section is uploaded is different in the K, even though the scoring criteria have not changed. So number of different things, just for you to be aware of as we head toward this new form set. So make sure you're working from the correct form set. Last time I looked, and I haven't looked this week, but the last time I looked, it had not yet been released. So stay tuned for that, but it will be released well before, hopefully within the next week or two. Okay, so in terms of what we are covering today, we have a guest today. We're welcoming back Dr. Becky Miro is going to be speaking to us about the R37 merit. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Becky to introduce herself and to talk about this week's topic.
Hey, Meg. Hey, everybody. So I have about 25 years, maybe not 30 years of experience in the research administration circles, mostly in higher ed administration. and I've done both central sponsored research and departmental support. I've been a certified research administrator since 2004, and I have a PhD in higher ed administration with a research methods concentration. So all the information we're gonna talk about today will also have a blog post on the BGG website in a couple of days. And Riley has provided the link to the blog itself. So if you have that, then you can keep up and check when we've actually posted the blog post. So I'm going to share the short presentation on R37s. All right, can we see that? I think that's right.
Yes, I can see that.
Awesome. Okay, so a little bit about the R37s. They're known as the Merit Awards, and Merit stands for Method to Extend Research in Time. And the purpose is to provide, and this is straight from NIH, long-term grant support to investigators whose research competence and productivity are superior and are highly likely to continue to perform in an outstanding manner. And what the Merit Award is, it gives up to 7 years of support, and they award it in 2 phases. So the first phase is 5 years, and then there's an extension period of up to 2 years. The catch is that you can't apply for an R37. So NIH has a couple of mechanisms like this. The other one is the R56, where you can't apply for it. Program staff identify meritorious applications that have received a score within the respective institute and center's pay line. They also look at applications from investigators who have demonstrated superior competence and excellent productivity, like the quote said. And they have significant records of scientific achievement. They work in an area of special importance or promise. And so what happens is the program staff identify these applications and then opt to convert them to an R37. The merits are not common. I did a short search in Reporter, and so in fiscal year 2023-24, they awarded 69 total. And then I went ahead and looked fiscal year 24-25, and there's only 5 so far. So as you can see, they just don't, they're very selective. So only a few institutes and centers award the R37s. So NIA, NCI, NIAID. And at NINDS, the merit is actually called the Javits Neuroscience Investigator Award, and it's named after Senator Javits from New York, who had ALS. And he was a huge advocate for support of research for brain and nervous system disorders. A lot of the other institutes and centers have phased them out. I want to say it was NICHD that I saw that last awarded it in fiscal year 24. NHLBI used to have them, but from what I found, these are the 4 that issue them now. And within each institute and center, there may be different eligibility criteria. So for example, NCI limits R37s to early stage investigators. NIAID and NIA, on the other hand, will award it to any researcher that meets the definition and the criteria for getting an R37. And NINDS, most of the awardees generally have 2 cycles, so 10 years of continuous NINDS R01 or equivalent support, but they also have a record of service to NIH or NINDS. And so earlier, when I mentioned that you've got the 5 years and then the additional 2 years, so before they'll award you the additional 2 years, and again, it depends on the institute and center, they may request a variety of information. And as you can see just from this slide, it's not small. They will, ask for a progress report, which makes sense, a research plan for the extension period and updated aims, how the research plan for the extension period falls within the scope of the parent grant. They want a budget for the extension period, human subjects and or animal subjects updated information if it's going to change, and if it's not going to change, a statement to that effect, grant related publications, and even other support documents. So that's R37s in a nutshell. Meg, because folks can't apply for these, would you recommend that they reach out to a program officer if they feel they're going to score well or that they've scored well?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably worth doing that. I'll add a couple of things just kind of based on, I always learn from these things too, because NIH is just a gigantic landscape of information. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I call myself an NIH expert. That doesn't mean that I know everything about NIH. That's for sure. So I learned from this as well. I will say that among my clients, I think the only clients I've had who have had R37s were at NCI. And I don't know if that's partly a function of the fact that NCI's budget is bigger than every other institute, and also partly a function of the fact that a lot of my one-on-one work is with academic medical centers, and particularly with cancer departments. So it may be kind of a function of those two things. Certainly, if you are applying for if you're an ESI applying for an R01 at an institute that has an R37 and you have a killer score, like 2% or so, like really 4%, something really stellar, it can't hurt to reach out to the program officer and speak with them. I will say that this is yet another reason in the avalanche of reasons why I think it's really important to build a relationship with your program officer, because you want to be on their radar for these kinds. There are multiple types of mechanisms that you can't apply for, like the R56. This is another one, the R37. They're at the discretion of the program officer. So it's really important for you to be on the radar of the program officer when they're considering this, because it really, the beauty of this mechanism is that you get 7 years of funding. And while that second phase requires a lot of material, in all my years at NIH, I've never heard of an applicant not getting an R37 recipient not getting the extra 2 years. It's not a slam dunk. It's not a foregone conclusion, but it's, if you're demonstrating good progress in the first 5 years and you submit all those materials on time and in the form they ask, you're gonna get the extra 2 years of funding. And to get 7 years, a 7-year runway to launch your independent research career, sets you up beautifully for a competing renewal. And R37s are very prestigious. So sure, it definitely pays for you to contact your program officer if you are an ESI who applied for an R01 and got a stellar score at an institute that offers the R37. So do people have questions about this mechanism? I know that you can't apply for it directly, so it's not as if you're going to just run out and apply for an R37, but I think it's good to know about these types of mechanisms that are at the discretion of the program officer. Do people have any questions about that before we move on to the question? I have so far 2 questions not related to this. Okay, well, feel free to add any questions to the Q&A box. And as Becky said, the blog post is forthcoming. You can easily find the blog on our homepage. If you just go to bouviergrant.com, you'll find the blog on our homepage, and you can search for various things. And I think, oh yes, and Riley already posted the link to the blog post in the chat. So you can either click that link or just go to our homepage, bouviergrant.com. And there are lots and lots of really interesting topics in the blog. So, okay, so 2 questions that came in, and I'm going to ask Becky for help on both of them, because she has a different expertise than I do on these 2. So the first one is a scenario that's presented by an admin person about a faculty member. I have a faculty member interested in both an R35 with NIGMS and an R01 with NICHD. He's worried that if his R35 is successful and he loses his ESI status, it will be very difficult to get an R01 in the near future. And it is making him a bit hesitant to go for the Mira. The R35 is a Mira. The NIGMS PO, that's the R35 PO, has been unresponsive, which is a bummer. And the NICHD PO, which is the where he's thinking of submitting, he or she is thinking of submitting the R01, has been encouraging of him, particularly mentioning the higher ESI funding rates for the R01. Do you have any thoughts on this? He will be ready to submit his R35 in February, but if he does not, is likely looking to October for his R01. He's having a baby this spring. This is only his first year, so he has a lot of time for ESI time-wise. Thanks so much for any insight you may have. I'm hoping to, and that's about this. So my immediate thought, and Becky, jump in here because I know that we have a blog post on the R35, and there lots of information on the blog on the R35, and Becky and I have discussed the R35, but the R35 is very very prestigious. So like it's almost like when you say, this is how this lands for me, and maybe it doesn't feel this way to other people, but when you say he's worried that if he gets an R35, he's going to have trouble landing an R01 in the near future. It's almost like the person is saying he's worried that if he lands an R01, he's going to have trouble landing an R03. Like once you've landed an R01, like why would you worry? Like, so the R35 is super prestigious, and like if you can land an R35, you can land an R01. The R35 is much harder to land typically, especially if you have ESI status on the R01. So I wouldn't worry about like if you land an R35 and lose your ESI status. Is that an issue? Like you've reached for the brass ring. You got it. Go do your thing. Like publish. Like I don't think that's such a bad thing. So the funding lines on the R35 are certainly worse. They're more prestigious and harder to land. There are fewer of them. And given that this person, you report that this person is in their first year of their ESI status, they've got scads of ESI time. I would think that going for the R35 is probably the right thing to do. I don't know the time frame of them reaching out to the NIGMS PO for the R35. I don't remember that person's name, but I have had a lot of clients reach out to the NIGMS R35 PO successfully. So I'm wondering if the PO has changed, or if it's just a function of the fact that it's the end of the year and NIH is in an uproar because there are a lot of changes afoot and people are getting ready to leave for the holidays, and it may be hard to get a hold of that PO, and they may be more responsive if you try again in January. But my first inclination is to say, why not go for the R35? And if you're not successful, try the R01 in October. What do you have more to add to that, Becky? Do you?
No, that's exactly where I was going with it. The only other thing I was thinking, and I have to look up, is there anyone else besides that PO that they might be able to reach out to?
Yeah. There's probably only one, but let me look. NINGS R35 NOFO. Let's see. I'm just quickly looking it up to see if there's somebody else, but yeah, it's kind of a bummer. And sometimes an unresponsive PO is really can really hobble you. There are two actually. So maybe try the other one. So I'm going to share my screen just so people, because this is relevant. Whoops, that's not the one I want to share. Let's see. This is relevant to other mechanisms as well. It's not just this one, but you should be seeing the Section 7 agency contacts. So this is PAR 22180. It's the NIGMS R35. And if you come down here to Section 7 agency contacts, scientific research contacts, there are two. So I would, if you've been sending an email to both of them, maybe split them apart and send it to one or the other so that if one of them is out, the other will answer. Um, but yeah, I don't. Ashley Barnes is a name I recognize. I think that person has probably been around for a while on this mechanism. I don't recognize this name. That one I don't remember. But you know, there are hundreds of program officers just at NCI, so it's not as if I know them all. I just recognize that name, and I think that's somebody who's probably been on this NOFO for a while. So I would keep trying to get that R35 program officer, but you know, in the absence of that, I would probably advise this person to gear up for the R35 for February. Why not? You know, you've got scads of ESI time, and it would be a real feather in your cap. They're very prestigious to land that. That would be really lovely. And, you know, this person can always pivot and apply for the R01 in the fall. So, okay, so let's look at the oh, and before I forget, I have to remember we have two more questions, so I'll make this super brief. Um, we had a cancellation for the February 5th session that's coming up. And one of the things that I've kind of been fantasizing about is doing a live Ames edit on AGE, just sharing my screen and editing an Ames page live so you can see why I'm making the decisions that I'm making. And I'm wondering if anybody has an Ames page that they would be willing to let me edit live, or even a part of one, just the Ames or just the narrative overview, or you know, some portion of an Ames page. Um, I will make this offer with the proviso that these are sessions that are recorded, and not only are they available on our dashboard, they're available on our open YouTube channel, and it may get a couple of hundred views on our open YouTube channel. So you should redact the Ames page to your comfort level. So if you want to have me do this, make sure that you're removing anything that you don't want the world to see. So any unpublished data that might be sensitive, maybe your name or your organization's name, you might want to remove. So if I get at least like one person who is willing to let me do their Ames or a portion of their Ames, then on February 5th, I'll do a live Ames edit. So the way to let me know if you're interested is to email me directly, meg@bouviergrant.com. And Riley, if you want to drop my email, my direct email in the chat, and then I can speak with you offline about doing this. So just putting it out there. If not, we'll come up with another topic. It's not a big deal. But we had a cancellation, and it's something I've been fantasizing about. Okay, and the person who sent the question we just answered said, thank you. That's what I told him, but it will land better coming from you. Yeah, that is the beauty of a consultant, right? Is that sometimes we can be the bad guys when you don't want to, you know, like I don't have an ongoing relationship with your applicant. So like I'm just answering off the cuff, and sometimes hard news is or news that isn't going to land well with the person is best coming from somebody who doesn't know them. So okay, and then the next question, and we have like 5 more minutes. Can you talk about which aims need to be powered for an R01, i.e., do all primary aims need to be powered? If it's not powered, do we automatically call it a secondary aim? So by powered, I think what you probably mean is, are we aiming to get a statistically significant result from the aim? And I would say that unless it's an exploratory aim, not a secondary aim, but an exploratory aim, I think that the result of an aim on an NIH grant probably should yield statistically significant results. Particularly if it's like, let's say you have 3 aims, that has to definitely be true for aims 1 and 2. Maybe the third aim, you can get away with saying that this is just going to be, we realize we're going to look for trends in the data. But typically, if you're going to do that, you're going to call it an exploratory aim and declare that it is hypothesis generating, and we'll set you up for the follow-up R01. But yeah, pretty much even the secondary aims, pretty much everything has to yield some kind of statistically significant finding. And if it doesn't, you probably have to rethink how you're structuring it. So like if you're often what will happen, for example, is that an early stage project will have a certain sample size, and the sample size is large enough to power a statistically significant result unless you stratify by race, ethnicity, gender, sex, things like that. In which case you can say, we'll get a statistically significant result. We will look for trends in the data as we stratify for these other outcomes like race, ethnicity, and sex to inform fully powered studies in the follow-up R01. And that's kind of a very typical scenario, but some piece of it has to be statistically significant outcome. So, Becky, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't get into that level of the science typically, so I don't have more to offer now.
Okay, does anybody else
But it
have
made sense. It made sense just from
makes
what I
sense?
know. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it just isn't gonna, reviewers are just gonna,
Right.
particularly if you have a three aim or a one, like the first two aims, absolutely. The main portion of the first couple of aims has to be just yield something that's statistically significant. I think that's pretty much a given. And then the third aim can be exploratory, which is code for this is hypothesis generating, and I'm not yielding statistically significant results. I'm looking for trends in the data to inform the follow-up R01. So yeah, so that's my, again, I that's kind of my sense of having looked at successful applications, that's the case. So do other people have questions or comments? I'm taking a quick look in my email to see if there were any other questions that came in or in my list. Oh, there was another one. Do you happen to know if NIH is still granting COVID extensions? I would imagine that NIH is going to be granting COVID extensions until, so this is COVID extensions to the ESI. I think that's what this person is asking because that's what this is about, right? So the early stage investigator status is conferred to people who are 10 years or less from their terminal degree, and they have not been a PI on an R01 or equivalent, and it's a significant funding advantage. It's typically about 5 percentage points, but I've seen it be 7 percentage points or higher. So it is a pretty significant funding advantage. And when the pandemic occurred, a lot of people had pandemic related research interruptions and they were eligible to apply for extensions. I would imagine that NIH is going to be granting those extensions until we are 10 years from the pandemic, because they've asked that people not apply for the extensions en masse, because a lot of those extensions will prove unnecessary because people will land their R01 before they would have needed an extension. So they have asked people to wait until like a year before their ESI status runs out to apply for the extension. So I can't think of any reason why they would stop granting those extensions. And of course, they grant extensions for other reasons as well that are not related to the pandemic. It could be the most typical one is parenting. If you are a researcher who has birthed a child, it's an automatic 1 year extension, but they also give parental extensions often to people who have caregiver tasks. So I've never heard of anything saying that they're not granting them. I think there would be an uproar if they did, because, like, what if you were at the very, very early stages of your 10-year ESI clock during the pandemic and you don't apply for your extension dutifully until it's like 2028, Anyway, a couple of things just came in, so I'll just very quickly look. The main R01 funding opportunity for non-clinical trials expires on January 2025. So, yeah, I get this question all the time. So people, you just don't worry. All of those NOFOs are going to be reissued. I know, like, people have been like, man, I get like half a dozen of these a day. They're going to be reissued. All the NOFOs are going to be reissued, particularly for the parent R01. So PA 2183, 4, and 5, the parent R01 mechanisms, are all going to be reissued with the release of Forms I because there are changes to the scoring criteria, so they've got to rework them. They'll all be reissued before the next set of deadlines. NIH is behind on this. Normally the form set would have been out, the NOFOs would have been released. I don't know what the holdup is, but they've been behind on a lot of stuff. So our K01 and K99 recipients right before the pandemic eligible for the extensions that you just mentioned. Never heard about that possibility. So ESI status has nothing to do with the K. So I'm not sure if I'm reading your question correctly, but the early stage investigator status only applies to R01 applicants. It's not even small format ones. Oh, you're asking about grant recipients if they're eligible for extensions. I would ask your program officer. I don't, because I guess what you're asking is if I got a grant just as we were going into the pandemic and there was a big delay in launching it, am I eligible for extension? I would guess that as long as you're not asking for extra money, you could probably make a case for needing an extension. To the grant itself, to the time that you have for the project, because their goal is to give you the 5 years. I'm assuming these were 5-year awards. So I would talk to the program officer, but I would guess that you could make a case for getting an extension on that. Usually for all these extensions, you have to be super specific about the amount of time you're asking so they know how much time to add back to the clock. So if your lab was closed for 2 months, it's easy. You just say my lab was closed. You have your department chair sign a letter to that effect, and they'll give you the two months back. It gets a little dicier when you say things like key reagents were not available for 8 months. It gets a little trickier when you start making those cases because it's not a lab closure. But you need to document something and, ask for a fair amount of time back. What can they say? No, or offer you less time back? Be gutsy. Yeah. So anyway, that's my thought on that. And we're well out of time. So great to see you all. This is our last session before we break for the holidays. So have a wonderful holiday for those of you who celebrate, because 2 weeks from now will be Christmas. And we will see you back here on January 8th and January 22nd, where there's no mini tutorials. It's just straight up Q&A with me the whole half hour. So come armed with your questions, all of you February applicants. You can see if you can stump the grant writer. And yeah, we'll just do a Q&A for those sessions, and then hopefully somebody will let me edit their ACE page on February 5th, because that would be a lot of fun. So thank you all so much, and thank you for a lot of people came to First Fridays this in December, and I really appreciated the great turnout, and just love working with you guys. So have a wonderful end of the year. I'm grateful for all of you, and thank you, Becky, so much for coming back.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. So have a great holiday, everybody, and a wonderful new year, and good luck with your grant writing. Take care now. Bye-bye.